Today's lesson is How Canned Food Change the World? Hi, everybody. My name's Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're going to be talking about the history of canned food, or food put in cans or put in tins, however you want to say it. And yes, indeed, we kind of take these things for granted. I don't really see a lot of canned food here in Taiwan. There is some, but it seems like we have more in the U.S. than they do here in Taiwan because y'all like fresh food. You go down to the local market and buy stuff fresh. But indeed, sometimes you need to buy food that is in cans because it will last longer on the shelf.
That's true. My kitchen has a lot of canned food in it because this is the stuff I bought 2 or 3 years ago when we thought there'd be big COVID lockdowns.
Right, yeah.
And I went out and I bought a bunch of canned beans and canned vegetables. You're right, fresh food is good. The other thing is, of course, kitchens in Taiwan are often smaller, so the storage space is less. I think that might be another reason, but it's true. You can get good fresh food on the street in Taiwan almost any time of the day. Why would you need canned food? But in places like North America, where maybe shops were, further apart, when people lived out in the countryside, at times of the year when they couldn't necessarily get to the store or get fresh food, like during the winter, when it's hard to get fresh fruit and vegetables, canned food was very, very important. It's one of those things that really changed the world back when it was invented, but like a lot of things like air conditioning or refrigerators or running water in our homes, we take it for granted. But if you think of life without canned food and being able to preserve food, keep it for long periods of time, and have it still be fresh and tasty to eat, it is really a big invention. So we're going to learn a lot about the actually kind of interesting history of canned food and how it connects to Napoleon Bonaparte.
What a great connection. So let's begin our lesson by listening to the first part, and then we'll be right back to discuss it.
How canned food changed the world. With so much fresh food at our disposal, it's easy to forget how vital food preservation has been throughout human history. Its importance is shown with particular clarity in the history of canning, an invention that has not only helped food last longer, but has also influenced everything from war to art.
大家好，第一部分我们先来介绍形容词 vital， 它的意思是极其重要的或是必不可少的。例如 A good diet and lots of exercise are vital if you want to live a healthy life. 如果你想过健康的生活，良好的饮食和大量运动是极为重要的。再来我们看到单字 clarity， 它是名词，意思是清楚、清晰易懂或是有条理。例如 The water had very low clarity, so it made it difficult for the divers to see. 水的透明度很低，所以潜水员很难看清。或是Christie is known for her clarity of thought and intense drive to succeed. Christie 以其清晰的思路和强烈的成功动力而闻名。另外补充它的动词 clarify, C-L-A-R-I-F-Y, clarify. 它的意思是阐明或是澄清。例如 The politician clarified his position on several key issues during the interview. 那位政治人物在访问中澄清他在几项重要议题中的立场。又或者说 I don't understand what you are asking, so could you please clarify your question? 我不懂你在问什么，所以可以请你说清楚你的问题吗？接下来我们看到名词 invention， 指的是发明物。例如 My father works for a company that helps scientists sell their inventions. 我爸爸在一间帮科学家销售发明产品的公司工作。再举一个例子The telephone is one of the most important inventions of all time. 电话是有史以来最重要的发明之一。
Okay, so again, we're talking about how canned food changed the world. I did want to mention that the title here begins with the word how, but that does not mean it's a question. If I want to make this a question, I would say, How did canned food change the world? Well, I'll tell you how canned food changed the world, and we're going to find out now by listening to us explain the article. So here in the first paragraph it says, with so much fresh food at our disposal, it's easy to forget how vital food preservation has been throughout human history. So yes, indeed, because we have so much fresh food available to us, then we can forget how important preservation has been while people have been on the planet Earth here. So if something's at your disposal, you have access to it, it's available to you. And yes, indeed, here in Taiwan, fresh food seems to be at our disposal pretty much all the time.
It does, and it's a wonderful thing. But, you know, canned food has something to be said for it. As it says, it's easy to forget how vital food preservation has been through human history. Something vital, very, very important. Something you absolutely need. It's almost necessary, right? Food, air, clothing, shelter. These are vital for people to live. You absolutely need them. You can't live without them. And preservation here, talking about preserving things. To preserve something is to keep it safe for future use or to protect it in ways that stop it from getting worse, breaking down, falling apart, going rotten. So when we talk about food preservation, we're talking about the things that we can do to extend the natural life of foods and keep them fresh and healthy and tasty longer than otherwise nature would allow. If you just leave your food out on the kitchen counter, it won't be so good in a day or two. But if you want to get into some food preservation, stick it in the refrigerator, keep it cool, put it in a bag, wrap it up. These things help with food preservation or keeping it healthy and fresh to eat for longer. It says its importance is shown with particular clarity in the history of canning, an invention that has not only helped food last longer, but has also influenced everything from war to art. There you go, the broad sweep of how canned food changed the world. It changed the way we fight wars to the way we make art. It's going to be interesting. But this is going to be brought to us with particular clarity. Clarity is having something be very clear. We could talk about the clarity of lenses or glass or a telescope or something like that. An image will have clarity if it's very clear, if it's not fuzzy and out of focus. And if we bring clarity to a topic or a subject or an issue, that's basically like greater understanding. We're making it easier to understand, clearer, less confusing, less muddy. So if you really understand something, or if you have an expert explain something complicated to you, then that will give you more clarity or greater and deeper understanding. So clarity of the history of canning. Yeah, putting things in cans is called canning.
Yep, we are already assuming that food preservation is important, so that importance is shown to us with some great clarity if we talk about the history of canning, which again is the process of putting food in cans for future use, like Spam, for example, is an example of canned meat that soldiers used during World War II. And again, we're talking about the history of canning, and we're calling that an invention. Canning hasn't always been around. Adam and Eve were not able to can their apples in the Garden of Eden for later use. Someone had to invent canning. And of course, when you talk about the process of inventing something, then you're talking about the invention of something. So we're talking about the invention of canning. And canning has not only helped food last longer, but has also influenced everything from war to art. That's an interesting connection there to art, which we'll find out later on.
Canned food was initially invented to help an army win its wars. In 1795, the French general Napoleon Bonaparte was struggling to keep his soldiers fed while they fought across Europe. Disappointed with existing food preservation methods like smoking and salting, he offered a cash prize for a new, more effective method. Eventually, candy maker Nicolas Appert claimed the reward in 1810. His solution was to use long glass jars that were stuffed with food, then closed and heated. With this process, modern food preservation came into existence.
第二部分我们看到单字 eventually， 它是副词，意思是最后、结果、最终或是终于。我们来看个例子。The heavy traffic slowed us down, but we eventually got home. 大塞车拖慢了我们的速度，但我们终于还是到家了。 再看一个例子 Boris eventually found his missing ring. Boris 最终找到了他遗失的戒指。
Okay, so the second part of our article talks about war, and canned food was initially invented to help an army win its wars. So initially here just means at the beginning. This, of course, is where canning came from. At the beginning, canning was invented because armies needed to carry food with them. And, of course, if they did not have food with them, they would get hungry, they would starve, and they would not have enough energy to fight the enemy.
In 1795, the French general Napoleon Bonaparte was struggling to keep his soldiers fed while they fought across Europe. Yes, Napoleon was a young general at that time fighting across northern Italy. And when you're trying to feed tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands of men and their horses, but mainly the men, it's a struggle. It's difficult to do. Napoleon was having great difficulty keeping his soldiers fed or feeding them, keeping them from being hungry every day while they fought across Europe. You know, back in those days, they would basically go to the local farms wherever they happened to be marching and steal all the food. But eventually, if the army stays in a certain area for a day or two, they basically eat all the food in the area, and this can be a real struggle to feed all of these different people. Disappointed with existing food preservation methods like smoking and salting, he offered a cash prize for a new, more effective method. So there were ways of preserving food. These ways had actually been used for thousands of years. Smoking, right? Smoking your meat or your fish. That removes all the moisture from it and allows it to last much longer. And you can also salt things. It basically does the same type of thing. You salt your beef, you salt your pork. It ends up being quite chewy and tough, but you can boil it or just chew on it, and eventually it'll turn into a food of some kind, maybe not the most delicious kind and certainly hard on your teeth, but these are the ways that people had preserved food going back thousands of years, but they weren't exactly wonderful. So Napoleon thought, well, in this more modern age that he lived in with science making big discoveries, he decided to offer a cash prize to a clever inventor for a new, more effective method to preserve food because smoking and salting just weren't quite effective enough.
Yeah, not effective enough on the battlefield. Of course, you're carrying all this food with you. It's quite heavy, and if you're going to smoke it, it's going to take some time. If you're going to salt the food, that will take time as well and probably require large containers to carry the food with. So he wanted a more effective method for preserving food, okay, to put it in a smaller space perhaps and to be lighter and to be more easily carried into the battlefield and off the battlefield when the soldiers were done fighting and they wanted to sit down and have some pork and beans or something around a campfire or whatever. So eventually, you know, finally in the end, after a long period of time, candy maker Nicolas Appert.
Ooh, very good.
Yeah, he was a candy maker. That's somebody who makes candy. So I guess he knew a thing or two about making food and preserving it for future use. When you do make candy, of course, you need to put it in wrappers and things like that so the kids can have it later on. They're not going to eat it right away. So I guess this guy knew a thing or two about food preservation.
That's right. But of course, this took some time. That's why we use the word eventually. It's useful to use in a story when you're kind of saying, and then some time passed, and after the time passed, something else happened. It's not really that important. We can do the math and see, wow, it was actually 15 years until someone claimed the reward, but this happened after some time. So eventually, in 1810, 15 years later, this guy Nicolas Appert, he claimed the reward. When you claim a reward or claim a prize, you basically are saying, I did it, I'm the champion, I'm number one, you know, I was the first to reach the goal or whatever. They have to still give you the prize, but if you feel confident in your position as the winner, you can say, there you go, I'm the winner, where's my prize? I am the champion. Everyone give me a round of applause or whatever. So what was his solution? His solution actually wasn't cans, the way we would think of them. This is interesting. His solution was to to use long glass jars that were stuffed with food, then closed and heated. Okay, closing it, heating it, this is what we do with cans, but we certainly don't put our canned food into long glass jars. That would sound like a rather easy way to break them.
Right, if they're made out of glass, especially. A jar, of course, is made out of glass. Usually it's kind of short and fat, and you can put things like peanut butter in them or mayonnaise or whatever. Jam, indeed. And these were long ones, so they're stuffed with food, and then they're closed after they're stuffed with food, and then they're heated, and that's a process. So with this process, modern food preservation came into existence, which means it started to exist. We had it now, people could use it, but this does sound kind of, half-baked idea, no pun intended there, but indeed, later on, they need to make it lighter and less subject to breaking. As you said, glass can easily break or shatter. Okay, let's move on now to the third and final part of our lesson for today. We'll listen first.
It took only a few years for people around the world to start using Appert's technique and improving on it. For example, another Frenchman, Philippe de Girard, soon obtained a patent on a method for sealing foods in tin cans instead of glass jars. Further improvements slowly followed, and in 1888, the German inventor Max Ams introduced double seams, which provide an airtight seal to prevent contamination by bacteria.
第三部分我们看到的是动词 obtain， 指的是获得或是取得。举例来说 ，You need to obtain permission before you can enter the room。你需要获得许可才能进入那个房间。再举一个例子 ，Mark obtained a law degree from Harvard in 2022。Mark 在2022年取得哈佛大学的法律学位。最后我们看到单字 contamination， 它是名词，意思是污染或是弄脏。例如 The factory had to be shut down due to toxic radioactive contamination. 由于有毒的放射性污染，导致这间工厂必须关闭。又或者说 Groundwater contamination occurs when man-made products like gasoline or chemicals seep into the water supply. 当人工制品如汽油或化学物质渗入供水系统，就会造成地下水污染。
Okay, so we're talking about food preservation here, and we've got Nicolas Appert, and he got the reward from Napoleon Bonaparte way back in 1810 using those long glass jars, which were stuffed with food and closed and heated. And then we got food preservation, but it took only a few years for people around the world to start using Appert's technique and improving on it. So, of course, I guess this was a needed skill. I guess people other than soldiers needed food preservation as well. Sometimes we have droughts or something and there's no food, so we will have to have food preserved somewhere.
True.
So lots of people heard about this and they started using this idea, but again, they probably thought those glass jars were kind of cumbersome, kind of heavy, easily broken, so they had to improve on his idea. We could also say to make improvements on something.
That's right. And actually, it was another Frenchman who took the next step towards modern canning, the way we think of it. It says, for example, another Frenchman, Philippe de Girard, soon obtained a patent on a method for sealing food in tin cans instead of glass jars. Much harder to break a tin can than a glass jar. So there you go. But it was in France that this other Frenchman, some kind of inventor as well, he obtained a patent on a method for using tin instead of glass. When you obtain something, you get something. Probably through hard work and some effort or something like that. You obtain a degree from a university. Something took you some time. It took you some effort. You wouldn't really say, I obtained a bottle of Coca-Cola from 7-Eleven. No, you bought it or you got it. When you obtain something, it's a little bit bit harder to get, and you had to put some effort into it. So he obtained a patent on a method for sealing food in tin cans. A patent, basically, it's something that recognizes that you invented something for the first time. You were the creator, the inventor, the smart person who came up with this new machine, this new thing, this new engineering concept, and then you take it to the government, to the patent office, and they have experts there who look at it and compare it to other things like it and say, oh yeah, yours is different. You've done something new and original, so we're going to give you this document that basically protects your idea from being copied and stolen and having other people take your idea and make money from it. So if you have a patent on a machine and another company wants to make that machine or use that thing, they have to pay you based on the patent that you won or that you obtained for your tin cans. You had this idea, I'm going to make it out of tin, it's going to be this big, the tin's going to be this thick, this is how I'm going to close it, and I invented it, Philippe de Girard. I'm not using glass, I did it in a different way, a new way, my way, and a better way.
Indeed, but that was not the final product or the final version. Of course, it still needed some improvements. So further or additional improvements slowly followed, and now we're shifting to Germany. In 1888, the German inventor Max Ams introduced double seams, which provide an airtight seal to prevent contamination by bacteria. A seam is where two substances or two surfaces come together. You'll see seams on your clothing, for example, where your sleeves attach to the main part of your shirt. There will be seams there. So yes, if you look at a tin can, there's going to be areas where the metal comes together. And these are double seams, I'm assuming on the top and the bottom there, and they provide an airtight seal. If something's airtight, air cannot get in, or it's kept inside, or it's kept out. The air cannot pass between one area or the other.
There you go, and that will prevent contamination because you don't want the food to be contaminated. To contaminate something is basically to make it dirty, to introduce bacteria or some outside material that will cause it to be rotten or bad or poisonous or something like that. We prevent contamination by washing our hands, by cleaning a cut when we cut ourselves, using alcohol or something like that. So contamination is something that we try to prevent by using soap and cleaning things and avoiding bacteria that can cause infections and sickness. And of course, if you get contamination in your food, it could give you food poisoning. So let's not have that. And we can avoid that by sealing things so that they are airtight. The air won't carry bacteria into the food, making it contaminated.
And there's a lot more to say about canned food in our next program. Please join us then. But before we say goodbye today, we'd like to hear from Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分的第一句写到，罐头食品最初是发明来帮助军队打胜仗。那文中它用到 initially 这个副词来表达最初开始，它的形容词是 initial。那我们来学习它的字首字根。好，看到 it 这个字根啊，意思就是 go， 就是有走啊、行走或者是去的意思。像 visit 拜访、orbit 轨道都带有 it 这个字根。好，那我们看到在 initial 这个字当中，它的字首 in 表示进入， it 表示走，那么 ial 是形容词字尾。同学们可以想象，当你从入口开始往里面进去，往里面走，那就表示是从起点开始的，所以用这样去联想说 initial 这个字表示开始的、最初的。好，我们也顺便补充几个有相同字根的单字。第一个字就是大家很熟悉的这个 exit， E-X-I-T， 那它的字首 E-X 表示向外， I-T 是走， exit 就有这个出口啊，或者是离开、退场的意思咯。第二个补充的是 transit， 它的字首 T-R-A-N-S 表示贯穿， I-T 表示走，那合在一起 transit 它就有过境、通过的意思咯。像我们就可以用 transit passenger 来表达过境旅客。好，那么第三个补充的是 ambition， 它的字首 A-M-B 或者是 A-M-B-I 这部分它有 around， 就是周围环绕的意思。字根 I-T 表示走， ion 是名词字尾。什么叫环绕着走呢？其实这个字在拉丁文原本的意思是说四处游说来取得选票，那我们就可以用四处走动来游说争取他人支持自己的目标理想，用这样的画面去联想到 ambition， 它有抱负、野心或是梦想的意思了。好，在课文第3部分呢，它有用到 obtained a patent， 用来表达取得一项专利。那么动词 obtain 它就表示获得、取得。我们也来学习它的字首字根。好，当你看到 TAIN 这个字根啊，它就有 hold 或者是 keep 的意思，可以表达保留、持有或是维持。那么在 obtain 这个字当中，它的字首 OB 是用来强调语气。那么 tain 它有保留、持有的意思嘛，所以合在一起 obtain 就是取得、获得。好，那我们也来补充几个有相同字根的单字。第一个是detain， 它的字首 de 表示离开，那么 tain 是保留，把要离开的人事物强留下来、保留下来，这样也许可以联想到说 detain 它有拘留或是扣押的意思了。第二个补充的是 pertain， 它的字首 per 表示透过，那么 tain 就是表达 hold 持有的那种意思。那我们可以试着用透过某人、透过某种关系而持有某事物，去联想说 pertain 它有相关、附属的意思。好，第3个补充的是 maintain， 它的字首 main， main 这部分表示手，那么 tain 是维持。那同学们可以试着联想，用手来做维持、保养的工作，那么 maintain 这个动词就可以表达保养、维修，那它也有维持、保持的意思咯。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Vital. Additional study is vital to Barry's chances of passing the exam. Preservation. Special chemicals are used for the preservation of the famous painting. Clarity. The teacher said Nadine's essay lacked clarity. Invention. The internet is an invention that has had major effects on everything from trade and politics to art and science. Initially. Initially, Grace disliked learning piano, but she loves to play now. Eventually. Although it took some time, Jay's broken arm eventually healed. Obtain. Through hard work and talent, Amy obtained admission to the university of her choice. Patent. Dr. Mathis has applied for a patent on the new invention.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.